Imagine a man who trolled his entire society, lived in a barrel, and insulted kings. Was he the first cancelled philosopher? Before cancel culture, before Twitter mobs, there was Diogenes, the most outrageous man in ancient Greece. He mocked wealth, insulted philosophers, and lived like a beggar. People hated him, but couldn't ignore him. So let's ask, was Diogenes really cancelled, or was he simply unstoppable? To find out, we must go back to where Diogenes' trouble began. Born around 412 BC in Sinope, Diogenes had a wealthy father until scandal destroyed his family. His father was accused of tampering with currency, an unforgivable crime in the city. Diogenes was exiled, stripped of status, and thrown out of Sinope. But exile didn't break him. It turned him into a legend. Arriving in Athens, he found a city full of wealth, politics, and hypocrisy. Instead of hiding in shame, he made his disgrace his power. When people mocked him, he mocked them back, louder, harsher, funnier. He became a student of Antisthenes, a strict philosopher who taught simplicity. But Diogenes took simplicity to extremes no one dared. He gave up possessions, lived on scraps, and even called himself a dog. That's why people called him Diogenes the Cynic, from the word kynikos, meaning dog-like. But Athens wasn't ready for a man who lived like a dog. His behavior shocked the public. Was this man a philosopher, or just insane? He once carried a lamp in broad daylight, saying, "I am looking for an honest man." The joke hit hard. Athens was full of wealth, but empty of honesty. His insults didn't stop there. He openly ridiculed philosophers like Plato. When Plato defined man as a featherless biped, Diogenes brought a plucked chicken to class. The crowd loved it. Plato looked foolish, Diogenes looked fearless. But others hated him. He was tearing down respected institutions with mockery. Imagine today if someone trolled Harvard professors live on YouTube. That was Diogenes. He was Athens' most shameless troll. Yet people kept watching, kept talking, just like we do with controversial influencers today. He wasn't ignored. He was everywhere, loved, hated, but never forgotten. He showed society its own reflection, and society hated the mirror. Every stunt, every insult was both comedy and philosophy. But the more outrageous he got, the more enemies he made. He was becoming the most controversial figure in Athens. If cancel culture existed, Diogenes would have been its first victim. But here's the twist. Canceling him only made him stronger. He turned rejection into fame, disgrace into power. And that's why his story still echoes today. But this was only the beginning of his war with society. The scandals were about to get even more outrageous. He didn't just attack ideas. He attacked lifestyles, marriages, and even kings. If Diogenes were alive today, he might be trending on Twitter for all the wrong reasons. He mocked politicians, priests, and even philosophers. Nobody was safe from his sharp tongue. Imagine a man walking into a crowded marketplace with a lantern at noon, shouting, "I'm looking for an honest man." That wasn't just strange, it was a public insult to everyone's morality. Some loved his boldness, others hated him for humiliating society in broad daylight. In today's language, Diogenes was being cancelled. But unlike celebrities today, Diogenes didn't care about his reputation. In fact, he wanted rejection. Why? Because every insult proved his point. Society was too obsessed with appearances. Here's the twist. What people saw as shameful, Diogenes saw as freedom. So, was Diogenes truly cancelled, or was he the first man to cancel society itself? Take his war against luxury. He once trampled on Plato's expensive carpets, shouting, "I trample on Plato's vanity." To Plato, it was vandalism. To Diogenes, it was truth-telling. He turned philosophy into public theatre, a performance designed to shock people awake. And shock them he did. He ate in public, defecated openly, and mocked social manners. Why? Because he believed shame was an invention of the powerful. If the system made you ashamed, the system owned you, and Diogenes refused to be owned. His acts weren't random, they were protests against hypocrisy. But not everyone saw it that way. To many, he was just disgusting and dangerous. His clash made him both a celebrity and a criminal, an icon and an outcast. Sound familiar? That's exactly how cancel culture works today. When society couldn't silence him, they ridiculed him. But Diogenes turned ridicule into his brand, living proof that rejection is power. Instead of fearing society, he made society fear him. Even Alexander the Great, the most powerful man alive, couldn't intimidate him. When Alexander offered him anything he wanted, Diogenes replied, "Step aside, you're blocking my son." That moment was a cancellation of power itself, a beggar outshining a king. But boldness has a price. His critics called him mad, vulgar, even dangerous for the youth. And yet students admired him. They saw a rebel exposing truth. For every person who cancelled him, another was converted by him. This paradox kept his legend alive for centuries. He was hated in his lifetime, but unforgettable after death. Because you can cancel a man, but you can't cancel an idea. And Diogenes' idea was radical: live free from shame, wealth, and social chains. This is why his legacy still makes people uncomfortable today. He wasn't polite, he wasn't nice, but he was honest. And honesty, as Diogenes proved, is the ultimate rebellion. So ask yourself, was Diogenes cancelled, or was he simply uncensorable? His enemies thought they were silencing him, but history turned his defiance into legend. And legends don't get cancelled, they get remembered. Diogenes doesn't just provoke, he attacks the very foundations of Greek philosophy. His number one target? Plato, the golden boy of Athens. When Plato defined man as a featherless biped, Diogenes plucked a chicken and marched into class. "Here is Plato's man," he shouted, mocking Athens' most respected thinker. This wasn't just a prank, it was a public cancellation of Plato's authority. Plato called him Socrates gone mad, but madness was Diogenes' weapon. Because in a world of polite lies, madness looked a lot like truth. He mocked temples, tore down traditions, and called ceremonies a waste of life. To ordinary Athenians, he was either a prophet or a blasphemer. But what truly made him dangerous was his war against the family itself. Diogenes refused marriage. He called wives and children unnecessary chains. He even insulted Xanthippe, Socrates' wife, calling her proof of why men should avoid marriage. The story goes, when Xanthippe threw water on him, Diogenes calmly said, "After thunder comes rain." Instead of defending women, Diogenes mocked them as symbols of control. To feminists today, he might sound like a misogynist, but to rebels, he was fearless. And fearless he was. He ate like a dog, slept like a beggar, and rejected shame itself. This shamelessness earned him the nickname, the dog. But in Greek culture, being called a dog was an insult. Diogenes turned it into a badge of honor. He taught that freedom comes only when you stop fearing society's bark. So was he a philosopher, or just an ancient troll? Because trolling was Diogenes' strategy. Every stunt carried a lesson. When Athenians mocked his poverty, he told them, "You laugh at me for begging, but you beg from politicians." He flipped insults into mirrors, forcing people to see their own hypocrisy. And that is why the system feared him. They couldn't control his narrative. When exiled, he spread cynicism. When mocked, he gained students. Every attempt to cancel him backfired into free publicity. That's why some call him the first influencer, ligging scandal as content. His life was a performance, but one with teeth. Because while others preached in schools, Diogenes preached in the streets. And in the streets, you can't hide behind fancy words. No wonder people called him insane, but was it madness or ultimate clarity? He broke every rule to expose how fragile rules are. He mocked power, love, money, even gods. That's more than controversial. It's dangerous. And yet, in danger, he thrived. Because to him, rejection was proof of truth. He knew society only cancels what it secretly fears. That's why Diogenes wasn't afraid of being cancelled. He wanted it. And that made him untouchable. Today, we cancel people with hashtags. Back then, Athenians cancelled with laughter. But no matter how loud the mockery, Diogenes' voice kept shining through. Ironically, the man who rejected fame became unforgettable. He owned nothing, but left behind more influence than kings. So, was Diogenes cancelled, or did he cancel society first? Ask yourself, do you admire him, or does he make you uneasy? Because if he makes you uncomfortable, that was his mission. He lived not for applause, but for truth. And that's why Diogenes cannot be cancelled, even in death. He is history's original uncancelable voice. But here's the real question. What truly matters in life? That same question challenges us today, in a world of noise. Would Diogenes survive cancel culture today, or master it? He might be the only man who wanted cancellation and turned it into power. That's why, 2,000 years later, we still debate him. He wasn't society's victim. He was its most brutal critic. And maybe that's what true philosophy is meant to be. Next time someone gets cancelled, remember Diogenes. Was he cancelled, or were we cancelled by his honesty? What do you think? Was Diogenes a cancelled philosopher, or history's first uncancelable? Drop your answer in the comments, I'll be reading. If you enjoyed this story, smash that like button. Subscribe for more untold stories of philosophy and human truths. Because the most offensive ideas often carry the deepest lessons. Diogenes mocked the rich. He shamed the wise. He defied the powerful. He lived free, while others lived trapped. He owned only a barrel, but it was enough. Isn't that the ultimate victory over cancel culture? Cancelled by men, remembered by eternity. Hated in his time, admired in ours. He showed us you don't need approval to live with meaning. You just need courage. And maybe the courage to be hated. That's what made him unforgettable. That's why Diogenes is not cancelled, he is eternal. His barrel became a throne of truth. His life became a lesson. Diogenes proved the truth may offend, but it never dies.